Well, it is Sunday the 22nd of October. I'm protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse of all kinds, both sexual and non-sexual, in front of the so-called Unitarian Church of Montreal. And things have been going quite well. In the distance there you can see a couple, a woman in a pink or crimson jumper type thing, and a guy in a dark blue jacket. They basically smiled at me, gave me the thumbs up, and the man touched his heart, basically expressing approval and sympathy for my protest. Unfortunately, the camera wasn't running because I was trying to get the sensor to cool down so I can record more continuously. The sensor was definitely overheating, but you can just take my word for it that that happened. And that was a very nice gesture. Oops, just had a little accident here. The white car bumped into the rear of the red car there. So, uh-oh. And nothing too serious from the look of things, but anyway, what if you're just going to let that one go, or I think they're probably just going to let it go. Pretty minor incident. But anyhow, getting back to things, it's actually kind of funny. There's a police officer right there directing traffic, so I guess they'll be able to sort that out soon enough. But yeah, it doesn't look like a whole lot of damage was done. Anyhow. So getting back to things, today's protest is protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and some other injustices and abuses, such as misuse of the criminal justice system to try and conceal clergy abuse of all kinds, but more specifically such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. The Unitarian Church of Montreal locally, and also the Unitarian Universalist Association, have on various occasions attempted to misuse the criminal justice system of Canada to not only force an end to my protest, but to potentially throw me in jail for a couple of years if I was found guilty of the criminal charges that I was accused of or even actually charged with. And they did actually, Montreal Unitarians did manage to get a 1-year restraining order against me on the basis of what I consider to be a combination of paranoid fantasies and perjurious lies. The standard for obtaining restraining orders is lower than a criminal trial. In other words, you do not have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that a person is guilty of something. You basically just got to pretend to be afraid, or genuinely be afraid too. But I think in the case of Montreal Unitarians, there was a lot of basically fake, fear of me, or if they were actually afraid of me, well, it was irrational fear, also known as paranoia. In any case, a bunch of Unitarians, including Sue Montgomery, made all kinds of depositions to the police, claiming to be very, very frightened of me. Some of them claimed to be in fear for their life. They thought that I was they claimed, I shouldn't say they thought, they claimed to think that I was going to come into the Unitarian Church of Montreal and blow them all away with a gun or something. It's not all of them, but at least one, and I think it was more like 2 of the depositions to the police that were made by Montreal Unitarians, certainly one made by Sean Doring, basically said that, they were afraid that I was going to come into the church and shoot people, which is ridiculous if they paid attention to my protest and everything. But they're basically just trying to demonize me as much as possible in order to get a restraining order against me. And in their minds, it was going to be a permanent restraining order. They basically spewed a whole pile of bullshit in order to get a restraining order against me that they thought they'd be able to extend permanently. In other words, once they got it, that was it, I'm done, Well, it didn't quite work out that way. I got one of the worst judges in Quebec court, one of the most hard-nosed, least competent judges in Quebec. I won't name her right now, but anyone who knows her name, who's a lawyer or anything, knows what I'm talking about here. And she essentially, whoops, there goes my phone. Let's just see what's happening here. Hi there. Yeah. I'm in the middle of my protest. Could you call me back in about 15 minutes, half an hour? Okay, catch you later. Yeah, bye. So yeah, just a call from a family member. I just let them know that I'm busy protesting and now's not the best time to talk. So anyhow, 5 minutes, almost 6 minutes into this section of video, let's just see if it's overheating at all. Nope, so far so good. 56% battery power, we're okay. But yeah, I'm basically planning to wrap this up pretty soon anyway, but that was a little distraction. And we're almost done here. So anyway, you know, basically the whole thing is oh yeah, the restraining order, what I consider to be quite unjustified restraining order. Sue Montgomery and a bunch of other Montreal Unitarians supported Reverend Diane Olenek-Rollert in what I consider to be a very misguided at minimum, and I'd say highly questionable on the legal front, effort to get a restraining order against me. A restraining order that they thought they could extend indefinitely. And they did so by claiming to be terribly, terribly frightened of me, afraid that, you know, that I was going to cause some kind of physical harm to them and so on, even come in and, you know, commit mass murder, according to at least one of the depositions, and I believe actually two. They basically compared me to the guy who went into Dawson College and shot up Dawson College and killed, well actually that person, I think in the end they killed one student, but others were injured and so on. But yeah, they were comparing me to this guy who went into Dawson College and murdered some people, and you know, similar such you know, murderers in their depositions to the police. So I contested that. You know, I tried to show to the judge that that no, there's, you know, this is just irrational fear. This is paranoia. I've never said or done anything that could really support that kind of fear, and that this and it maybe not even actual fear. It may be total bullshit. It might be lies. Might be perjury. Might be people just lying through their teeth in order to shut down my protest. Very real possibility there. So anyway, as I said, I got one of the worst judges in Quebec. She's no longer a Quebec court judge, and you know, she hemmed and hawed, and in the end, she granted the restraining order. You know, she actually prevented me from thoroughly cross-examining Reverend Diane Rollert. Reverend Diane Rollert was the only witness for the prosecution. There was nobody else. There was a bunch of written depositions, but in terms of actual witnesses in the court, it was Reverend Diane Rollert. And when I tried to question her about her own self-confessed deep irrational fear of flying, you know, she claimed, you know, that she didn't have such a fear. Even though she'd written a sermon and published a sermon and, you know, delivered a sermon about her extreme fear of flying. I can't remember off the top of my head what the scientific term for extreme fear of flying is, but according to one of her sermons, Reverend Diane Olenek-Rollert suffered from this basically, well, irrational fear of flying. Whatever kind of phobia you want to call it, it's, you know, basically a phobia. And so what I wanted to try to show in court is that, you know, her claimed fear of me, you know, was basically no more rational than her fear of flying, her severe fear of flying, which she had already, you know, publicly, you know, delivered a sermon about. And so when I questioned Reverend Diane Rollert, you know, basically asked her, you know, do you have a severe phobia of flying? She came back with no. She said no. And when I tried to question her further, you know, to bring up the sermon she'd written and so on and so forth, in which she, you know, claimed to have had a severe fear of flying, Basically a phobia. Good morning, sir. It's always a good morning for me out here, as a rule. You know, she just denied it, you know. So I tried to question her further, and the judge shut me down. Said, no, that's it. You know, she answered the question, you know. So as far as I'm concerned, that was basically unprofessional conduct on the part of the judge. You know, I have every right to ask a series of questions, but she shut me down after Reverend Diane Rollert answered no to my question about her fear of flying that she wrote sermons about and delivered the sermons, you know, put them out on the internet for everyone to read. So anyway, but getting back to it, you know, Reverend Diane Rollert's involvement in this is totally complicit in all of the injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy that I'm protesting against. She's totally complicit in all of the, you know, cover-up and denial of clergy abuse. You know, she's basically part of the problem. Her whole thing about shutting down my protest in front of the church was in part to try and conceal the Unitarian Universalist religious community's clergy abuse problem. And when I say clergy abuse, I mean in the broadest sense of the word. I'm including both non-sexual and sexual clergy abuse in that term. That's why I use the general term here. You know, I could even characterize Reverend Diane Rollert's abusive misuse of the criminal justice system in an effort to shut down freedom of speech as something of a you know, non-sexual clergy misconduct. She certainly violated the claimed principles and purposes of Unitarian Universalism in doing what she did. The Unitarian Universalist religious community calls for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. So you do not consider an immoral and unethical and borderline criminal attempted misuse of the criminal justice system to shut down very legitimate, peaceful public protests to be in alignment with that principle of Unitarian Universalism. I believe that's the second principle. The fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, if I remember correctly, calls for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As far as I'm concerned, Reverend Diane Rollert has repeatedly gone to considerable lengths to try and conceal and even outright deny the truth, you know, the truth about the clergy misconduct and clergy abuse. I don't even like using the term misconduct that much these days because it basically minimizes the problem. We're talking abuse here. We're talking verbal and psychological abuse at minimum, abuse of power, abuse of authority, but then we get into the sexual abuse, which includes, you know, ministers having affairs with congregants and this and that, but goes right into such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers such as Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and others, because he's not the only one. And then there's the whole issue of similar behavior by a Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers such as Stephen Craig Bullite. I'm just going to let this person pass here. So anyhow, I think we're going to wrap this up. It's been a great little protest. It's a beautiful day. I got a phone call to respond to. And I think it's been very successful. And yes, as I predicted, the SPVM did not intervene. Not in any direct way anyway. You know, they did not stop and get out of their car and discuss the situation with me. They did not arrest me. They did not give me a ticket or anything like that. So they certainly did not intervene from that perspective. So that's it. I think we've had a very good protest today. And I'm not quite sure what time it is. Let's see if I can see what time it is here. What did I do with the phone? There we go. So, if it's past 11 or close to, yeah, right on the dot, it's 11 o'clock, so we're done. We're going to wrap it up. I normally protest up to about 11 o'clock. Sometimes I'll go have a coffee and come back and basically protest as people are leaving the church. It's very tempting to do that. I'd like to do that, but I actually have some other things to do today that might interfere with. So I think we're just going to call it a day here. But I'd say it's been a quite successful protest for October 22nd. Covered a fair number of issues. Got evidence of Stanislaus, whatever his name is, being a bit of a jerk. Basically engaging in a certain amount of, basically just getting in my way, and there's really no reason for him to be out there on the sidewalk trying to get in my way. It's basically low-level intimidation as far as I'm concerned. But hey, if you want that on YouTube, be my guest, Mr. Stanislaus. So yeah, Stanislaus, he's totally complicit in everything. He's involved himself in erasing my chalk slogans and so on. He has definitely tried to get this protest shut down. So that makes him totally complicit in all of the injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy that I'm protesting against. As far as I'm concerned, makes him an active participant in some of the injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy I'm protesting against. I don't consider him to be responsible for the Unitarian Universalist Association's false blasphemous libel accusation against me, but he's certainly responsible for trying to hide that as much as possible, and in doing so he's helping Unitarians cover up and deny pedophilia and rape. So yes, well done, Mr. Stanislaus. You are totally complicit in the Unitarian Universalist religious community's immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, and if you don't mind my saying so, bat shit crazy attempted misuse of Canada's blasphemy law and clergy sex abuse, cover up and denial of legal bullying, which seeks to conceal such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, most certainly committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, one of them being Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell from the Montreal Public and